Admiral Velthar stared at the massive holographic map floating in front of him. The blue glow lit up his tired face as he watched his empire fall apart piece by piece. Each red dot on the map meant another world in rebellion. The yellow markers showed where pirates attacked his supply ships, but the black zones were the worst. Entire star systems eaten alive by something called the Void Swarm. The Kethmoran Empire used to rule half the galaxy. Now Velthar could barely keep his own homeworld safe. His fleets were scattered thin across thousands of light years, fighting fires everywhere, but winning nowhere. Every day brought new reports of disaster. Mining colonies going dark. Trade. Routes cut off. Civilian ships disappearing without a trace. Velthar's forearms moved across the control panels as he tried to make sense of the chaos. His species had ruled space for over 1,000 years. They were smart, organized, and powerful, but now everything was crumbling faster than they could fix it. The worst part was the Void Swarm. Nobody knew where it came from or what it wanted. The creatures moved like a plague across the stars, consuming everything in their path. Planets, ships, space stations, nothing stopped them. They turned entire solar systems into empty graveyards floating in the dark. His aide, a young officer named Krixtal, approached nervously. The younger Kethmoran's scales were pale with worry. "Admiral, we have something strange on the long range." "Sensors." Velthar turned away from the depressing map. "More bad news?" "I'm not sure, sir. There's an unknown vessel holding position in the disputed zone." The Admiral's mandibles clicked together, a sound his people made when confused or shocked. The disputed zone was a death trap. Massive gravity wells pulled ships apart. Radiation storms fried electronics and killed crews within hours. Even their best warships avoided that area of space. "Are you certain?" Velthar asked. Krixtal nodded and brought up a new display. There it was, a single contact sitting calmly in the middle of hell itself. The ship's design didn't match anything in their databases. It wasn't Kethmoran, and it wasn't built by any of the other known species in the galaxy. "How long has it been there?" the Admiral asked. "At least 6 hours, sir. Maybe longer. It's not moving. Not sending distress signals, not doing anything. Just sitting there like the radiation and gravity don't affect it at all." Velthar studied the readings carefully. The disputed zone had killed hundreds of ships over the years. Scientists said nothing could survive there for more than a few minutes. Yet this mystery vessel acted like it was parked at a peaceful space station. Could it be some kind of probe or automated ship? He wondered aloud. "Life signs are positive, Admiral. There's definitely a crew aboard. This changed everything. If someone had found a way to survive in the disputed zone, they might have technology that could help save the Empire. Or they could be another threat in a galaxy already full of dangers." Velthar made his decision. "Prepare a scouting force, small and fast. If these strangers can live where nothing else can, I need to know who they are and what they want." "Captain." Li Min stood on the bridge of the UES Resilience, watching 3 alien ships slowly approach his position. The vessels moved carefully, almost afraid to get too close. He could understand why. The space around them was a nightmare of twisted gravity and deadly radiation that would kill most life forms in minutes. But humans weren't most life forms. Li had been out here for 2 weeks, following strange energy readings that Earth scientists wanted investigated. The signals led them through what his star charts called the disputed zone, a region of space that supposedly killed everything that entered it. His crew had nicknamed it the Graveyard after seeing all the ship wreckage floating around. The thing was, it didn't feel that dangerous to them. Sure, the radiation levels were high, and the gravity fields were tricky to navigate, but nothing they couldn't handle. Li's engineering team, led by Kim Tae-ho, had actually been enjoying the challenge. They treated it like a puzzle to solve rather than a death sentence to avoid. "Captain, I'm picking up 3 vessels on approach," called out Navigator Yoon Da-un from her station. "They're keeping their distance, but they're definitely scanning us." Li nodded. "Any idea what species we're dealing with?" "Negative, sir. Ship designs don't match anything in our database. This is definitely first contact territory." Communications Officer Park So-young looked up from her console with excitement in her eyes. "Sir, they're trying to establish communication. Multiple frequencies, several different protocols. They're really working hard to talk to us. Lee smiled. After months of deep space exploration, finding intelligent life was exactly what they'd hoped for. Open a channel, So Young. Let's see what our new neighbors have to say. The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of an alien bridge. The creature that appeared made Lee's crew lean forward with interest. It looked somewhat like a cross between a lizard and an octopus, with 4 arms and scales that shifted color with what seemed like emotion. Right now, those scales were flashing between pale yellow and bright orange. The alien's mouth opened and closed several times before any sound came out. When it finally spoke, the universal translator kicked in, turning the clicking and hissing sounds into understandable words. This is impossible," the alien said, its voice shaking. "No species can survive in the disputed zone. Our best warships cannot last an hour in those conditions. How are you alive?" Lee exchanged glances with his bridge crew. Dr. Cho Hyejin, his chief medical officer, raised an eyebrow and whispered, "They think this place is deadly." "I am Captain Lee Min of the United Earth Ship Resilience," Lee said calmly. "We've been conducting scientific surveys in this region for several days now. The conditions are challenging but certainly not impossible to work in." The alien's scales went completely white. "Several days? You have been here for several days." "Is that a problem?" Lee asked. Behind the alien, Lee could see other crew members, gathering around their captain, all staring at the screen in amazement. They were pointing at displays and talking rapidly in their clicking language. "Forgive me," the alien captain said, trying to compose himself. "I am Scout Commander Zixmoth of the Kethmoran Empire. We have monitored your vessel for hours, trying to understand how you survive where our people would die. Your very existence challenges everything we know about survival in deep space." Lee realized they had stumbled into something much bigger than a simple first contact situation. Admiral Velthar had ruled fleets for over 30 years. He'd seen every type of military organization, from brutal dictatorships to loose confederations. But as he stepped aboard the human vessel, he felt like he was entering an alien world that made no sense. The first thing that struck him was the noise. Kethmoran ships operated in near silence. Crews spoke only when spoken to, orders flowed down from the top, and nobody questioned their superiors. But the human ship buzzed with conversation. People talked freely, laughed, and even argued with each other without fear. Admiral Velthar watched Captain Lee Min walk through his bridge, stopping to chat with different crew members. Not to give orders, but to actually ask their opinions. The Kethmoran admiral saw a young human at a weapons console, probably the equivalent of a junior officer, point at something on his screen and start explaining tactical theory to his captain. In Velthar's empire, such behavior would result in immediate punishment. Junior officers didn't teach senior officers. They followed orders without question or faced severe consequences. Yet here was Captain Lee, nodding seriously and asking follow-up questions, like the young man's ideas actually mattered. Engineer Kim Tae-ho approached with a tablet in his hands. "Captain, I've been thinking about our power distribution. So if we rerouted energy from the secondary systems during combat operations, it could give us a 15% boost to shields." Lee studied the display. "What do you think, Tae-ho? Any downsides?" "Well, we'd lose some comfort systems, but nothing critical. The crew could handle it." Before Lee could respond, Dr. Cho Hyejin joined the conversation. "From a medical standpoint, temporary loss of climate control shouldn't be a problem. The crew is healthy enough to handle environmental fluctuations." Velthar watched in amazement as 3 humans discussed the proposal as equals. No one pulled rank. No one demanded obedience. They were solving problems together, like a team rather than a rigid hierarchy. "You run your ship like a democracy," Velthar observed. Captain Lee smiled. "Not exactly, but we value input from everyone. The person closest to a problem usually has the best ideas for solving it. Why wouldn't I listen to experts who know their jobs better than I do?" This concept was so foreign to Velthar that he struggled to understand it. In Kethmoran society, leaders led and followers followed. Questioning authority was a sign of weakness and rebellion. Later, as Lee showed him around the ship, Velthar mentioned the refugee crisis plaguing his empire. Millions of civilians were fleeing the void swarm, overwhelming the few safe worlds that remained. How many refugees are we talking about? Lee asked immediately. Perhaps 2 million across 12 systems, but why do you ask? They are not your people. Lee stopped walking and looked at Velthar with genuine confusion. They're people in trouble. That's enough, but you have no obligation to help them. No treaty binds you to our cause. You could simply leave and avoid our problems entirely. We could, Lee agreed, but we won't. When people are suffering and we have the ability to help, we help. It's not about obligation or treaties. It's about doing what's right. Velthar felt his scales shift to deep blue, the color of profound confusion. Your species helps strangers without reward or requirement? It's what we do, Lee said simply, as if the concept needed no further explanation. The Admiral realized he wasn't just meeting a new species. He was encountering a completely different way of thinking about civilization itself. Chief Engineer Kim Tae-ho led a group of Kethmoran scientists through the engine room of the Resilience. The aliens kept stopping to stare at human technology with expressions that ranged from confusion to horror. Their scales flickered between colors that Kim had learned meant disgust and disbelief. "This is your primary power core?" asked the lead Kethmoran scientist, whose name Kim couldn't pronounce. The alien pointed at what looked like a massive, ugly block of metal and cables. "One of them," Kim replied cheerfully. "We have 3 main cores plus 6 backup units and 12 emergency power cells scattered throughout the ship." The alien's scales went pale yellow. 21 power sources? That is absurd. Our ships require only 1 perfectly calibrated fusion reactor, elegant, efficient, and beautiful. Kim walked over to a wall panel and opened it, revealing a maze of wires, pipes, and mechanical components. "See this? If our main computer fails, we can run the ship manually. If our fancy sensors break, we have basic optical systems. If our artificial gravity goes down, we have magnetic boots and handholds everywhere." Another Kethmoran engineer examined the exposed systems. "This is primitive. You use mechanical switches and analog controls. Our ships rely on quantum processors and neural interfaces. And what happens when those quantum processors get hit by an electromagnetic pulse?" Kim asked. The alien paused. "Well, they would cease to function." "Exactly. But these old-fashioned switches, they keep working. Our ship might not be pretty, but it's tough." Park Jinwoo, one of Kim's assistants, was replacing a damaged circuit board nearby. The Kethmoran scientists watched as he pulled out a toolkit that looked like it belonged in a museum rather than on a starship. "You repair your technology with hand tools?" one alien asked in amazement. "Of course," Park replied, tightening a bolt with a simple wrench. "Anyone on the crew can fix basic problems. We don't need specialized factories or rare materials. Most of our parts can be made from scrap metal if necessary." Dr. Cho Hae-jin joined the group, having overheard the conversation. "The Kethmorans are having trouble understanding our engineering philosophy," Kim explained to her. "It makes sense when you consider where we come from," Dr. Cho said to their alien guests. "Earth is what you would probably classify as a death world." The lead scientist's scales shifted to orange. "Death world? But you evolved there naturally." "Right. Which means we adapted to survive in conditions that would kill most species. Our home planet regularly tries to murder us with hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, floods, droughts, ice ages, and radiation from solar flares." Kim nodded enthusiastically. "So when we build things, we assume they're going to break. Everything needs to work even when it's damaged, flooded, frozen, overheated, or struck by lightning. But surely your technology has advanced beyond such." "Crude methods," protested a Kethmoran engineer. "Advanced, yes. Abandoned, no," Kim replied. "Look, your fusion reactor might be 30% more efficient than ours. But when pirates shoot at it, it explodes spectacularly. When they shoot at our reactor, it keeps running because we built it to take a beating." Park held up a piece of equipment that looked like it had been run over by a truck. "This scanner fell down a maintenance shaft, got flooded with coolant, and was exposed to radiation that should have fried its circuits. Still works perfectly." The Kethmoran scientists examined the battered device in disbelief. Their own equipment would have been completely destroyed by any one of those incidents. "You sacrifice efficiency for durability," one alien observed. "We sacrifice some efficiency for reliability," Kim corrected. What good is a perfect machine that breaks the first time something goes wrong? Space is dangerous. Equipment fails. People make mistakes. We design our technology to keep working anyway. Dr. Cho smiled at the bewildered aliens. Earth taught us that survival matters more than perfection. Pretty ships are nice, but ships that bring their crews home alive are better. The emergency alert screamed through the bridge of the Resilience. Captain Li Min rushed to his command chair as his crew scrambled to their battle stations. On the main screen, a terrifying sight unfolded. Dozens of black, insect-like ships were swarming around a convoy of civilian vessels. "Report," Li barked. Tactical Officer Yoon Da-Yoon's fingers flew across her console. Kethmaran refugee convoy under attack. 53 Void Swarm scouts engaging 12 transport ships. The transports have no weapons and minimal shields. D. Watch the alien creatures tear through the convoy's escort ships like they were made of paper. The Void Swarm vessels moved unlike anything he'd ever seen, flowing and twisting through space like living things rather than machines. Their weapons fired some kind of energy that seemed to eat through hull plating. Distance to target? 12 minutes at maximum burn, Captain. Admiral Velthar, who had been observing from the back of the bridge, stepped forward urgently. Captain Lee, you cannot engage them. The Void Swarm scouts are deadly fighters. Even our best warships struggle against such numbers. How many civilians are on those transports? Lee asked, ignoring the Admiral's warning. Da-Yoon checked her readings. Approximately 8,000 refugees, sir. Mostly families fleeing the outer colonies. Lee didn't hesitate. All hands to battle stations. Helm, set course for the convoy. Maximum speed. Sir, Da-Yoon said carefully, tactical analysis suggests immediate withdrawal. We're outnumbered 50 to 1. Engagement parameters are beyond recommended safety margins. The captain looked at his tactical officer with calm determination. Da-Yoon, those are 8,000 innocent people about to die. What do our safety margins matter compared to that? Engineer Kim Tae-ho's voice crackled over the intercom. Captain, I can give you full power to weapons and shields, but our engines will be running past red line limits. Do it, Tae-ho. Whatever it takes. Admiral Velthar watched in amazement as the human crew prepared for what should have been a suicide mission. No one questioned the order. No one suggested abandoning the refugees to save themselves. They moved with practiced efficiency, each person focused on their job. Entering weapons range in 30 seconds, announced Navigator Park So-young. Lee studied the tactical display. The Void Swarm had noticed his approach and were forming an attack formation. Their ships moved in coordinated waves, like a school of predatory fish preparing to strike. Captain, they're beautiful flyers, Da-Yoon observed with professional admiration. Look how they coordinate without apparent communication. Beautiful or not, they're about to learn what happens when they threaten innocent people, Lee replied. All weapons, target the lead elements. We're going straight through the middle of their formation. Velthar's scales went pure white. Through the middle? Captain, standard tactics require maintaining distance and using superior firepower. Admiral, we don't have superior firepower. We have superior determination. Lee leaned forward in his chair. Helm, take us right down their throats. The Resilience plunged into the swarm like a battering ram. Human weapons systems designed for reliability over elegance pounded the alien scouts with steady, devastating fire. The ship's thick armor absorbed return fire that would have crippled more delicate vessels. Hull breach on Deck 7, reported Kim over the intercom. Sealing. Now. Shields down to 60%, Da-Yoon called out. Keep firing, Lee ordered. The battle lasted 18 brutal minutes. When the last Void Swarm scout was destroyed, the Resilience looked like it had been through a meat grinder. Scorch marks covered the hull. Several sections were sealed off due to damage, and half the crew was treating various injuries. Lee calmly updated his log. Engaged hostile forces threatening civilian convoy. Mission successful. No friendly casualties. Recommend commendations for outstanding crew performance under adverse conditions. Admiral Velthar stared at the captain in disbelief. You call this a successful mission? Your ship is barely functional. Lee smiled and gestured toward the rescued convoy. 8,000 people are going home to their families tonight, Admiral. I'd call that a pretty good day's work. The damage to the resilience was worse than it looked from the outside. Admiral Velthar followed the repair teams through sections of the ship that his radiation detector said should be instantly fatal to any living creature. Yet humans walked through these areas like they were strolling through a park. Engineer. Park Jin-woo was welding a hull breach in what the sensors showed as a high radiation zone. His left arm was wrapped in bandages from burns he'd received during the battle, but he worked steadily without complaint. When Velthar's aide tried to enter the same section, his radiation alarm started screaming immediately. "The human is going to die in there," the aide whispered in horror. But Park just kept working, occasionally pausing to wipe sweat from his forehead. After an hour, he emerged carrying his tools and looking perfectly normal. "Breach sealed, Chief," he reported to Kim Tae-ho. "Should hold until we can get proper materials for a permanent fix." Velthar approached Dr. Cho Hye-jin, who was treating injured crew members in the medical bay. "Your people work in conditions that would kill my species within minutes. How is this possible?" Dr. Cho looked up from bandaging a crew member's radiation. "Burns. Earth isn't a gentle planet, Admiral. We evolved to survive in an environment that constantly tries to kill us." She led him to a viewport where they could see the damaged sections of the ship. "See that area where the hull got peeled back? Radiation levels are about 50 times what your species considers safe. For us, it's like working outside during a bad thunderstorm. Unpleasant, but not deadly. But surely there are limits to what you can endure." Dr. Cho nodded toward Petty Officer Han Bo-ra, who was replacing damaged circuits in a flooded compartment. The woman was working waist-deep in contaminated water that glowed with radioactive particles. Bo-ra grew up near the Chernobyl restoration zone. Her grandmother worked in the cleanup crews after the nuclear accident. Her family has been dealing with radiation for generations. Velthar watched in fascination as another human, communications. Specialist Jang Mi-young crawled through a ventilation shaft that his instruments said was full of toxic gases. She emerged 20 minutes later with a replacement component, coughing slightly but otherwise unharmed. "On Earth, we have hurricanes with winds that can level cities," Dr. Cho explained. "We have earthquakes that split the ground open, volcanoes that fill the air with poison, and storms that drop lightning every few seconds. My home country gets hit by typhoons that make your worst space weather look mild." She pulled up images on her medical tablet showing Earth's natural disasters. Velthar's scales went pale as he saw massive storms, erupting volcanoes and floods that covered entire regions. "This is your home world?" he asked in disbelief. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Dr. Cho said with obvious pride. "Dangerous as hell, but it made us tough. When you grow up dodging tornadoes and living through ice storms, working in a radiation field doesn't seem that scary." Park Jin-woo joined them, having finished his repairs. His burns were already healing faster than should be medically possible. "Doc, the new guy wants to know if he can help with the reactor repairs." "New guy?" Dr. Cho asked. "Lee Dong-min, the engineer we picked up at the last station. He's only been with us 2 weeks. Velthar followed them to the engineering section, where a young human was studying the damaged reactor core. The radiation in this area was so intense that Velthar's equipment couldn't even get accurate readings. "Shouldn't he be wearing protective gear?" Velthar asked. Park looked confused. "For this? It's not that bad. Besides, the heavy suits would just slow him down." Dr. Cho checked her readings. "Dongmin's from Seoul. City's been dealing with industrial pollution and occasional radiation spikes for decades. His body adapted to filter out most environmental toxins. Your entire species is like this?" Velthar asked weakly. "Pretty much. Earth doesn't produce weaklings, Admiral. It kills them off early or makes them stronger. We're the descendants of the survivors." As if to prove her point, engineer Kim Tae-ho walked by, carrying a piece of equipment that was still glowing from residual energy. He was whistling cheerfully, treating the dangerous task like routine maintenance. Velthar realized he wasn't just observing superior technology or tactics. He was witnessing a species that had been forged in conditions that would exterminate most life forms, and somehow emerge stronger because of it. Captain Lee Min spread a holographic map across the briefing table, showing the Void Swarm's main hive cluster. The massive alien structure pulsed with dark energy, surrounded by thousands of smaller ships in defensive formations. Admiral Velthar studied the display with growing concern. "The hive has natural shielding from the asteroid field," Lee explained, pointing to the rocky debris surrounding the target. "Their scouts patrol in overlapping patterns here, and here. Command ships hold position at these coordinates." Velthar nodded. "Standard Kethmaran doctrine would be to strike the command vessels first, disrupting their coordination, then withdraw before they can respond in force." "That's Plan A," Lee agreed. "We hit their commanders with long-range missiles while the main fleet engages their outer defenses. Clean surgical strike. Sensible. What concerns me is that you mentioned Plan A. This implies other plans." Lee smiled and expanded the holographic display. "Plan B assumes their command structure is more flexible than we think. If destroying, for the leaders doesn't stop them, we target their supply lines instead, cut off their resources and force them to retreat. And Plan C? Direct assault on the hive itself. Brute force approach if the subtle tactics fail." Velthar's scales shifted to worried yellow. "Captain, such an operation would require enormous resources, ships, weapons, personnel, more than my entire remaining fleet possesses." "Actually, Admiral, let me show you something else," Lee said, highlighting several sections of the battle plan. "Plan D covers what happens if they have reinforcements we don't know about. Plan E deals with the possibility that the hive can move. Plan F assumes they have some kind of super weapon we haven't seen yet." The alien admiral stared at the increasingly complex tactical display. Each plan had subplans, backup options, and contingencies for scenarios that seemed almost impossible. Plan G through L cover various combinations of the above problems occurring simultaneously, Lee continued cheerfully. Plan M is what we do if everything goes completely wrong and we need to evacuate the entire sector. "This is madness," Velthar whispered. "You're planning for events that have virtually no chance of occurring." "That's the point," Lee replied. "When the impossible happens, and it always does, we're ready for it." Tactical Officer Yun Da-un pulled up resource calculations on her tablet. "Admiral, the captain's plans require about 12 times more firepower than your current fleet possesses, plus construction vessels, supply ships, mobile repair facilities, and enough raw materials to build a small space station." Velthar slumped in his chair. "Then these strategies are useless. We simply don't have such resources." Communications Officer Zhang Mi-young looked up from her console with barely contained excitement. "Captain, should I signal the fleet?" A. Lee nodded. "Go ahead, Mi-young. Time to let our friends know we need them." The main screen filled with incoming transmission signals. Dozens of them, then hundreds. Ship after ship appeared on the tactical display as the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace. Massive construction vessels that looked like floating cities, industrial ships bristling with manufacturing equipment, cargo haulers carrying enough supplies to build an entire civilization. Admiral Velthar watched in stunned silence as the display updated with new contacts. Battleships designed for prolonged combat, carrier vessels launching clouds of fighters, mobile shipyards that could construct new vessels in the middle of a battle zone. "How many ships?" he asked weakly. "About 800 in the main fleet," Lee replied casually, "plus another 300 support vessels, supply ships and mobile bases. Oh, and we have construction teams that can turn those asteroids near the hive into weapons platforms." "This is your exploration fleet?" "Part of it. Earth takes exploration seriously, Admiral. When we go somewhere new, we bring everything we need to stay there permanently if necessary." Engineer Kim Tae-ho joined the briefing, carrying a tablet full of construction plans. "Captain, the industrial ships can have the first weapon platforms online within 72 hours. We should be able to build a full defensive perimeter around the hive cluster within 2 weeks." "Build a perimeter?" Velthar asked faintly. "Standard procedure," Lee explained. "Instead of just attacking the enemy, we surround them completely, cut off all escape routes, establish supply bases, and turn the entire region into a fortress. Then we give them a choice: surrender or starve." Dr. Cho Hae-jin appeared with medical reports. "Captain, I've prepared field hospitals for expected casualties, also refugee processing centers for any void swarm creatures that want to defect." "Defect?" Velthar's voice cracked. "You never know," Lee said with a shrug. Maybe some of them are just following orders and would prefer peace. We always plan for the possibility that enemies might become friends. Admiral Velthar stared at the massive human fleet surrounding his tiny ship and realized he was witnessing a completely different philosophy of warfare, one that planned for every possibility and brought enough resources to handle all of them. Simultaneously, Admiral Velthar couldn't sleep. For 3 days he'd been watching the human fleet transform empty space into the largest industrial complex he'd ever seen. The noise alone was incredible. Thousands of construction workers, mining equipment, and automated systems working around the clock. Chief Engineer Song Woo-jin floated past his observation window in a work suit, directing a team that was hollowing out a massive asteroid. The rock, which had been floating peacefully in space for millions of years, was now becoming a spaceship factory. Velthar watched welding torches cut through stone like it was soft cheese. How long will this take? Velthar had asked yesterday. The shipyard. About 3 weeks for basic operations, Song had replied while reviewing construction plans. Full production capacity in maybe 6 weeks. Now watching the progress, Velthar realized Song hadn't been joking. Entire sections of the asteroid were already being converted into manufacturing bays. Human workers moved through the construction zone in environmental suits, treating the vacuum of space like a slightly inconvenient workplace. Industrial Coordinator Han Bora was overseeing an even more ambitious project on a nearby dead planet. Her teams had landed massive machines that were strip mining the surface and building factories at the same time. The planet's barren landscape was rapidly filling with industrial complexes, power plants, and storage facilities. This is impossible, Velthar muttered to himself, watching a refinery process raw ore into ship hulls in real time. It takes us months to build a single factory. They're building dozens. Captain Li Min joined him at the observation deck, carrying a cup of something humans called coffee. Impressive, isn't it? Bora's teams are ahead of schedule on the planetary installations. Ahead of schedule? They started yesterday. Well, the ground survey teams did most of the prep work while we were traveling here. Site selection, geological analysis, resource mapping. By the time we arrived, they knew exactly where to put everything. Velthar watched a human construction, crew assembling what looked like a space station from prefabricated sections. They worked with casual efficiency, like they were putting together furniture instead of building something the size of a city. Your people treat massive construction projects like routine maintenance, Velthar observed. Lee shrugged. Earth has big projects too. We've built cities in deserts, underwater habitats, orbital platforms. When you need to rebuild after hurricanes, destroy everything every few years, you get good at construction. Through the viewport, Velthar could see Park Jin-woo leading a mining operation inside an asteroid. The human engineer was using explosives to carve out new chambers, treating the dangerous work like a fun puzzle to solve. That man is setting off bombs inside a floating rock, Velthar pointed out. Jin-woo knows what he's doing. He used to work in Earth's asteroid belt, mining operations around Mars. This is actually easier, no corporate safety inspectors slowing things down. A communication signal interrupted their conversation. Song Woo-jin's voice came through clearly, despite being transmitted from inside the asteroid. Captain, we're ready to test the first production line. Want to see us build a fighter craft? Go ahead, Song. Show our guest what humans can do. Velthar watched the asteroid's new manufacturing systems come online. Raw materials flowed through, processing plants that had been carved out of solid rock. Assembly lines that hadn't existed that morning began producing spacecraft components with machine precision. 12 minutes from raw ore to finished fighter, Song announced proudly. Not bad for our first run. Velthar's scales went completely white. His people needed months to build a single fighter craft in their most advanced shipyards. The humans had just done it in 12 minutes, using equipment they'd built from scratch in 3 days. How many fighters can you produce per day? He asked. Weekly, from this asteroid, maybe 50 once we're running at full capacity. But we're building 4 more shipyards, plus the planetary facilities will handle larger vessels. Dr. Cho Hyejin appeared with a status report. Captain, the medical facilities are operational. We can handle casualties from a full-scale war, plus refugee processing, plus research on void swarm biology if we capture any specimens. You built hospitals too? Of course, Lee replied. You can't run industrial operations without proper medical support. Plus, if we're liberating Kethmoran worlds, we'll need to treat civilian populations that have been under void swarm occupation. Industrial. Coordinator Han Bora's voice came through the communication system. Captain, planetary production is online. We're manufacturing everything from ammunition to food processors. Also, the terraforming teams want to know if we should start atmospheric processors on the outer planets. Terraforming? Velthar asked faintly. Might as well make this region livable for refugees, Lee explained. No point in liberating people if they don't have anywhere safe to live afterward. Velthar realized he was watching humans casually reshape an entire star system like it was a weekend home improvement project. What his people considered massive undertakings requiring years of planning, humans treated as routine tasks to be completed between lunch breaks. Admiral Velthar stood on the observation deck of his flagship, looking out at what used to be the Void Swarm's most terrifying stronghold. 6 months ago, this region of space had been a nightmare of alien death machines and consuming darkness. Now it was a thriving hub of civilization, with Kethmoran families living safely on worlds that humans had made habitable in a matter of weeks. The war itself had been almost anticlimactic. Once the human industrial machine got rolling, the Void Swarm found themselves surrounded, outgunned, and overwhelmed by sheer productivity. They couldn't destroy human facilities faster than new ones were built. They couldn't match human firepower when factories were producing warships faster than they could be sunk. But the real change wasn't in the conquered territory or the defeated enemy. It was in how the Kethmoran people thought about problems. Captain Li Min approached, carrying the same casual confidence he'd shown since the day they first met. Admiral, we're about ready to move on. The exploration fleet has new star systems to survey. Already? But there's still so much work to be done. Here. Lee smiled and gestured toward the bustling space stations and planetary colonies. Look around, Velthar. Your people are handling the work just fine. And they were. Kethmoran engineers who had once insisted everything be perfect were now building functional solutions and improving them later. Kethmoran leaders who had ruled through fear were asking subordinates for advice and ideas. The rigid hierarchy that had defined their civilization for centuries was being replaced by something more flexible and effective. We used to think there was only one right way to do everything, Velthar reflected. Your way, our way, the old way. You showed us that there can be many right ways, and the best solution is often the one that actually works. Young Kethmoran officers were learning human engineering principles, building redundant systems and planning for failures. Their new ships looked less elegant than the old designs, but they kept flying when damaged and could be repaired with common materials. Your people have changed us, Velthar said. 6 months ago we were a dying empire, too proud to adapt and too rigid to survive. Now look at us. He pointed to a nearby construction site where Kethmoran and human workers were building together. My nephew is out there learning welding techniques from Engineer Park Jinwoo. My daughter is studying human medical practices with Dr. Cho Hee-jin. They're not just copying your methods, they're combining them with our knowledge to create something new. That's the idea, Lee replied. We didn't come here to replace your culture. We came to show you possibilities you might not have considered. Communications. Officer Jang Mi-young appeared with departure clearances. Captain, the fleet is ready to move out. Our next destination is the Andorian Nebula. Long-range sensors show signs of intelligent life. Velthar felt a pang of loss. More species for you to revolutionize? More friends to make, Lee corrected. Every civilization we meet teaches us something new. Your people showed us the value of precision and attention to detail. The next species will have their own strengths we can learn from. Industrial Coordinator Han Bora joined them, carrying a final status report. Admiral, the planetary facilities are running at full capacity under local management. Your people don't need us anymore. That was always the goal, Lee explained. We don't want to create dependencies. We want to share knowledge and then let each species find their own path forward. As the human fleet prepared to depart, Velthar realized what had really happened over the past 6 months. The humans hadn't conquered the Kethmoran Empire or forced them to change. They had simply demonstrated that there were other ways to think about problems, other approaches to challenges, other possibilities for civilization itself. "The question I've been asking myself," Velthar said as the Resilience moved away from the station, "is not what brought you to our space. It's how the galaxy managed to survive so long without you." Lee's response came through the communication system as his ship accelerated toward the unknown. "We're not special, Admiral. We're just stubborn enough to keep trying until something works. Every species has that potential. Some just need a little encouragement to remember it." Velthar watched the human fleet disappear into hyperspace, carrying their philosophy of practical problem-solving and impossible resilience to whatever. Challenges awaited them among the stars. Behind them, they left not subjects or allies, but friends who had learned to see the universe through human eyes, as a place full of problems waiting to be solved rather than obstacles too big to overcome. The Kethmaran Empire was dead. In its place stood something stronger, more flexible, and infinitely more capable of facing whatever the galaxy might throw at them next.